Yeah, of course it was, you know, I understand the rules. I helped write a lot of the rules. I was fortunate enough to be the attorney for the commission on that subcommittee that came up with this rule in 2006 or whatever it was. So I totally understand it. Nothing is more important to me personally than health and safety of the fighters. But yeah, I think this is a unique fight. I think there are unique circumstances. Again, when you have a world-class athlete like Floyd Mayweather, who is used to fighting in both 8 and 10-ounce gloves, when you have a world-class athlete like Conor, who's used to fighting in 4-ounce gloves, you know, again, if there's a fight to maybe try this out as a potential test case, I can't think of a better fight than this one.
It certainly wasn't your guys' idea. Your client's idea came from the other side, but I know you're more for legal representation than breaking down a fight, but on the inside, does this feel like a check mark advantage towards Conor McGregor?
Look, nobody can talk about this better than Conor. Conor, of course, is better at selling this fight than anybody. But I think what Conor would say to that is, Conor would be happy to fight in 16-ounce gloves or no gloves at all. He'd be happy to fight in a boxing ring or in an octagon. He'd be happy to fight in boxing shoes or in bare feet. He's ready for this fight. He doesn't care what the size of the gloves are. And when the opportunity, or when this challenge, I guess, was thrown down by Floyd, Conor immediately accepted it. I don't think there's that much more to it than that. Conor's ready to fight.
I'll admit to not know that much about boxing gloves covering MMA. So the fact that there's got to be some similarities, obviously both parties have different brands, different. How difficult is that going to be to ensure that, you know, these gloves are close enough that the commission's going to be okay with it?
Well, that's the best part. When you're dealing with a world-class entity like the Nevada State Athletic Commission, you're going to have the top level of scrutiny on that. You're going to have both camps that are going to be very heavily involved. They're literally going to take samples of these gloves, cut them open, feel through them, inspect them from top to bottom. So there's going to be no chance of any malfeasance with respect to the gloves. I'm really not concerned about that. The glove manufacturers are not anybody new that hasn't been seen before. I think they'll be the traditional, or some of the traditional boxing companies that have been out there. So they're used to making quality gloves. I don't anticipate there being any problems or any concerns.
Do we know what Conor's fighting in?
It's still it's not been announced just yet, but it will be announced shortly.
Thanks. And last thing I have for you, Mike. The chairman did have a moment where he was a little bit upset and had kind of a message. Do you think that's a lesson maybe for, I guess, all combat sports athletes moving forward, that, you know, be careful in the way you phrase things, don't put the NSAC in a position like that?
Look, absolutely. I have the utmost respect for Chairman Marnell, in particular, the entire Nevada State Athletic Commission. I come from their world. I've been a part of their world, and so yes, I absolutely respect that getting them involved in this is not a desirable outcome. That being said, I'm not 100% sure that maybe that Floyd was aware that just changing that would have necessitated, you know, all of this, you know, process. But again, whether he was or was not, at the end of the day, like I said, Conor is ready to fight no matter what the size of the gloves.
We haven't seen this many cameras in a while. Considering your history in this building with this commission, is this the biggest fight you've been a part of?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I've been a part of a lot of them, but this has the feel, and it certainly, I think, will end up being the biggest fight of all.
Now, Marnell mentioned distribution of the padding on the gloves. Do you anticipate that they're going to need to look at the 8-ounce gloves before?
Look, the Nevada Commission, to my best of my knowledge, looks at gloves before every championship fight. Frankly, before every fight, they're always checking the quality of the gloves. But I think when they're talking about distribution of the weight of the gloves, they're talking about the fact that not only is the weight contained in the padding on the front of the gloves, but there's also weight on the wrists. There's weight on the thumbs. So they're going to cut these gloves open. They're going to dissect them. They're going to look and see where everything's at to make sure that they're safe, to make sure that there's nothing untoward inside of the gloves, and that's going to happen on both sides. So I'm really not concerned for either camp about the content of the gloves.
So behind the scenes, was he pretty excited about the anticipation of moving down to 8 ounce?
Well, look, you know, the reality is what I mentioned in my comments. Conor has been training for this fight basically nonstop since February. Before the announcement kind of even started, before it was even announced, we were training for this fight. In anticipation of that, Conor has always, I guess, assumed based on the rules in Nevada that it would be with 10-ounce gloves. So he's been, and is still prepared to this moment to be using 10-ounce gloves because we didn't know how the outcome of this fight would be. But again, Conor is first of all, he's a consummate professional. He's done his entire professional MMA career wearing 4-ounce gloves in the UFC. So I think that it goes without saying that Conor would be more than comfortable wearing anything from 16-ounce training gloves on the one end to no gloves at all on the other end. I think he'd be comfortable in a boxing ring or in an octagon. And so I really don't think there's anything or any conditions that Mr. Mayweather could put on this fight that Conor wouldn't accept because he's that confident in his abilities.
You've been up there on the other side. Are you surprised that they allowed this exception?
So what I respect about the Nevada Athletic Commission is that everything that they do is with the lens of health and safety of the fighters, the financial health and safety of the fighters. In this case, I'm not surprised. You have two world-class athletes. You have Floyd, who has worn 8 and 10 ounce gloves interchangeably throughout his career. You have Conor, who's used to much smaller gloves and who's been training in 10 ounce gloves. So to me, if there is a perfect test case to try out this, it's this matter. I mean, you have two of the best athletes in the world, two of the best combat sports professionals in the world. I think this is the perfect case to try this out.